Texas is the second largest economy in America. If it were a country, it would have the 8th largest GDP in the world. Bigger than Brazil, bigger than Italy. Oil, tech, aerospace, agriculture, medicine. The money here is staggering. And right now, in 2026, there are communities in this state where people live without running water, without sewage systems, without paved roads, where children play next to pools of raw sewage, where families store drinking water in plastic drums because there are no pipes, where diseases that should not exist in a modern country, hepatitis, dysentery, tuberculosis, are documented at rates that would alarm health officials in any developing nation. This is not an exaggeration. This is data from the Texas Department of Housing, the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, and the Texas Tribune. These are 5 places in Texas where the living conditions look like they belong in a different century. And the fact that they exist inside the borders of the wealthiest state in the richest country on earth is something every Texan should know about. Number 5, Fresno and the Fort Bend County Colonias, southwest of Houston. And most people hear Houston suburb and picture master plan communities and new construction. But on the edges, in the unincorporated pockets that the city limits do not reach, there are neighborhoods that Houston's growth forgot. In parts of Fresno and the surrounding unincorporated areas of Fort Bend County, residents live in structures that barely qualify as housing. Trailers without proper foundations, houses built from salvaged materials, septic systems that leak into yards where children play, roads that flood with every heavy rain because there is no drainage system. These are not colonias in the border sense. They are pockets of rural poverty that got swallowed by Houston's sprawl without ever getting connected to Houston's infrastructure. The county does not have the authority or the budget to bring services to every unincorporated neighborhood. And the residents, many of whom are low income and lack the political voice to demand change, just keep waiting. The contrast is brutal. You can drive 10 minutes from a brand new Costco to a street where people are hauling water in buckets. That is not a figure of speech. That is Fort Bend County in 2026. Number 4, Port Arthur. We've covered Port Arthur before on this channel, but every time we come back, there is another layer to this story. This layer connects Port Arthur to the broader theme of this video. Poverty in Port Arthur is severe. The poverty rate is 29%. Median household income is $46,000, $30,000 below the state average. The refineries that surround the city produce billions in revenue. The people who live next to them earn almost nothing from that wealth. But what puts Port Arthur on this list specifically is what the refinery economy does to the physical environment. Cancer rates for Black residents in Jefferson County are 40% above the Texas average. Lung disease, kidney disease, respiratory illness are all elevated. Children in public housing grow up using nebulizers for asthma they have had since birth. In one 5-year period, 230 illegal air pollution events were documented from local industry. Hurricanes make the problem worse. Chemical exposure multiplies when stormwaters mix with industrial runoff. Evacuation routes flood and recovery takes years. The population has dropped over 20% since the 60s. The ones who remain are often the ones who cannot afford to leave. Port Arthur does not look like the developing world on Google Maps, but the health outcomes tell a different story. Number 3, South Fresno and the Hidalgo County Colonias, Rio Grande Valley. This is where the word Colonias enters the conversation, because what is happening here is not a metaphor. An estimated 500,000 people live in colonias along the Texas-Mexico border. These are unincorporated subdivisions built on cheap land that developers sold to low-income immigrants starting in the 1950s. They promised that water, electricity, and paved roads were coming. Most of them never came. In Hidalgo County alone, there are hundreds of colonias. Some now have basic services. Many still do not. The Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas found that more than 1,300 colonias statewide still lack basic infrastructure. 45,000 people live in the 350 colonias classified as highest health risk, meaning no running water, no wastewater treatment, no paved roads, no solid waste disposal. Hepatitis A rates in these communities have been documented at more than double the statewide average. Children swim in wastewater canals. Families burn garbage because there is no pickup service. Septic systems leak into groundwater that people drink. These are American citizens. 73% of Colonia residents are U.S. citizens. Most of the children are born here. The state has spent an estimated $1.8 billion on Colonia improvements since the 1980s. Progress has been made. About 100 colonias have been upgraded out of the worst classification since 2006. But hundreds remain, and the population keeps growing because there is nowhere else affordable to go. Subscribe if this is hitting you. The last two are the ones I had the hardest time writing. The conditions should not be possible in a state this wealthy. Number 2, El Cenizo, Webb County, south of Laredo, right on the Rio Grande. Population about 3,500. And El Cenizo has become a symbol of everything that can go wrong when a community falls through every crack in the system. For years, El Cenizo had no sewage system. Raw waste flowed into the streets and pooled in backyards. The smell was constant. Children played in yards where sewage collected after rain. Residents who complained were told that the city, which was incorporated but barely functional, didn't have the budget to fix it. A local resident named Christina Morales organized a petition, showed city officials brown water from her tap, photographed sewage pooling in a neighbor's backyard, and documented sewage coming from a kitchen sink. She attended utility meetings and was nearly turned away because she spoke limited English. Eventually, through years of advocacy, a sewage system was installed with state and federal assistance. But the underlying conditions haven't fully changed. Poverty remains deep. Roads are still in poor condition. Access to health care is minimal. The nearest hospital is in Laredo, about 20 minutes north. The median household income is among the lowest in the state. And El Cenizo exists in a kind of bureaucratic no man's land where the city government has almost no resources, the county has limited authority, and the state has historically looked the other way. El Cenizo is proof that being inside U.S. borders does not automatically mean access to basic American infrastructure. Sometimes it means being forgotten entirely. Number 1, the Cameron County Colonias. This is the place that represents the deepest failure. It is not one community, it is an entire region. At the very bottom of Texas, south of Brownsville along the Rio Grande. This is the epicenter of third world conditions in the state. Cameron County contains some of the most impoverished colonias in the country. In places like Cameron Park, the poverty rate exceeds 60%. More than half of residents have less than a high school diploma. The median household income is under $15,000 a year in America in 2026. Residents build homes from whatever materials they can find: plywood, cinder blocks, corrugated metal, tarps. There are no building inspectors because these areas are unincorporated and there is no code enforcement. Families add rooms as their families grow, one wall at a time, one paycheck at a time. Water access has improved in some colonias, but in others, residents still rely on storage tanks and water deliveries. When the tanks run low, they ration. Bathing, cooking, and drinking all come from the same limited supply. Wastewater flows into ditches and pools in low-lying areas, creating breeding grounds for mosquitoes and disease. The Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas described conditions in Texas Colonias as comparable to those in developing countries. The Texas Department of Housing calls Colonias one of the most critical housing needs in the state. Journalists from the Texas Tribune documented dengue fever, dysentery, and parasitic infections in these communities. A judge in Webb County once said that families live in third-world conditions in the state of Texas with a modern city just miles away. That sentence is the entire point of this video. A modern city just miles away. On the other side of that distance, families live without clean water in the richest country on earth. 5 places: an urban suburb with invisible poverty, a refinery city where the air makes people sick, a valley of neighborhoods without running water, a border town where sewage runs in the street, and an entire county where American citizens live in conditions most Americans do not believe exist. Texas is a state with enormous wealth, but that wealth has never been evenly distributed. The places on this list are the proof. They are not exceptions, they are consequences. Pretending they do not exist does not make them go away. I am not making this video to shame anyone. The people in these communities deserve better. The first step toward better is making sure the rest of the state knows they are there. Tell me in the comments what you think should be done. Subscribe for more honest Texas content. See you in the next one.